In this lecture, we'll learn about JavaScript variables. So simply what comes in your mind when we talk about the variable? So simply variables is a name of a storage location. That means it is something like a box where you store the elements. And there are the two type of variable in the JavaScript. One is local variable and another is global variable, and we'll see about them in this lecture. So first of all, we'll just create the variable with this var keyword. So you have to just make use of this var keyword to create any variable. After that, you give the name of the variable. So if I just say I'll just create the variable a, that means this is the name of the variable, and you make use of this single equal sign in order to assign the value to that variable, and give this colon or semicolon to end this statement. So if I just hit enter and print the value of a, that means it will show that is 12. That means a is now stored in the memory location with the value of 12. So you have created your own variable over here with this var keyword, giving the name a and assigning the value of 12 to it. So there is some rule while declaring a JavaScript variables, and they are known as the identifiers. And let's see what are those rules. So first is name must start with a letter A to Z or capital A to Z, or underscore or the dollar sign. That means the name of your variable should always start with this A to Z, that is your alphabetical, in the lowercase or in the uppercase, or it can also start with the underscore, or it can also start with this dollar, and it should not start with something like dot. So if I just create the variable like dot and contain variable, and let me just assign 89 to this, it will show syntax error because this is not valid to do. So you can see the rule over here. Name must start either with the letter, underscore or the dollar sign. But if you just make the variable like, let me say, the variable that starts with the dollar sign, and contain is my variable name, and this is valid. So if I just print this, the contain, that is the value will be 89 over here. So one rule is to create the variable name from this convention, and second one is after the first letter we can use the digit like this over here, which is value 1 is valid. But if you just start the variable name with the letter, or basically with the number, let me say 9 deg would be the variable name, then this is not valid. The name should always start with this convention, and after that you can put the digit, but it should not start with the digit. So next one rule over here is JavaScript variables are case sensitive. That means the x, which is in lowercase, and the x in the uppercase are different variable. So let's take the example over here. If I just say x is 89, and if I just print now, that is the capital X, then let me just remove this, and if I just see here, it will show me error, that is x is not defined. That means this small x is not same as the capital X or the uppercase X. That means the JavaScript variables are case sensitive. So you must take care of these three rules while creating the variables in the JavaScript, and these three rules are known as the identifiers. So you have to follow these rules in order to create the variables. So in the starting, I have already said you there is a two type of variables in the JavaScript. First one is local variable and another one is global variable. So let's see what are those. So first of all, we'll see about the local variable. So a JavaScript local variable is declared inside the block or a function. That means it is accessible within that function or block only. So let's take the example. So first of all, I'll just open my Sublime Text. Let me remove this, and as you know, the JavaScript code starts with this script tag and ends with this script tag. So over here inside this script tag is our JavaScript code. So let me just create the function with the JavaScript, and we haven't studied about the function, but it is simple, a code that repeats when you just call them. So basically you will just create a function with this function keyword and giving the name to this function, same as creating the variables. We'll study the function in the upcoming lecture, but just remember here that we make use of this variable, that is, let me just create one. So if you just see over here, this is your local variable, which is one type of variable in a JavaScript. So you have created the variable x inside this function abc. So if I just go over here and console, that is your variable, which would be x, it will show that x is not defined, because this x is visible, or this x is accessible inside this scope only. That means inside this function, and outside this function the x is invisible. That means x won't be reflected outside this function. So this is your local variable. That means this variable is declared inside the block, or you may say a function, and this is accessible within this block only, and outside this block it is not accessible. So this is your local variable, which is one type of variable in the JavaScript. So if I just create another example for you, so anything that is inside this script tag is your JavaScript code. And after that, if I just say if statement, which is the conditionals, and we haven't started this yet, but I'll just make a point over here. So if I just say that we just give the condition and give the block, just remember about this block only here, and inside this block I'll just create another variable. Let me say 40 is my variable y, and this is also your local variable. So if you just get the variable y over here, that is outside this scope, so let me just print this. So it should be console.log. so if you just make use of this console.log and the y, it will just throw you some error, because this variable, which is y, is accessible inside this scope only. That means inside these curly braces, and outside this scope or outside this block, this y is not visible. That means you can't simply print y over here, it will show error, or it will throw error. So next variable in the JavaScript is the global variable, and the global variable is accessible from any function. Unlike here, which is the case of a local variable, this variable y was accessible inside this function only, or inside this block only, but in the case of a global variable, it will be accessible from anywhere. That means it will be accessible from any function. A variable or declared variable that is outside the function or declared outside any window object is known as the global variable. So let's take the example of the global variable. So let me just remove this one, and let me just say data. Let me say 89 is my data, and now let me just create the function a and dot get confused with this function. So instead of function, let me just remove this and just give curly braces for you now. And if I just create another curly braces, so just remember this is one type of function, or basically scope. So if you just create this variable, which is data, outside of this scope, that means this variable will be visible over here too. So that means you can console and log your data over here, and similarly this data will be also visible over here inside this another block. That means this data variable is your global variable. So it is really easy to understand. That means any variable that will be visible or that will be reflected in any scope, or basically a variable which will be accessible from any function is the global variable, and if any variable that is only accessible inside one function is a local variable. So this will be wrap for this lecture, and in this lecture we'll learn about the variables in JavaScript, what are their types like global and local, and what are identifier. That means you have to make use of some rule in order to create the variable in JavaScript. So this was a short lecture on the variables. We'll see in the next one.